Good morning. Global markets are starting the day on edge as the Middle East conflict drives a fresh energy shock narrative. Investors are pricing in longer disruption after Iranian strikes hit a major Qatari natural gas complex, with Qatar Energy warning up to 17% of LNG capacity could be affected for years and flagging possible force majeure on long-term contracts. The Financial Times reports stocks and bonds fell as traders weighed an Armageddon scenario for gas markets. Europe is again confronting energy insecurity, with the BBC noting the continent's vulnerability to supply shocks and the political strain that follows. The conflict picture is widening and messaging is muddled. U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. knew nothing about an Israeli attack on a major Iranian gas field, while also warning of massive retaliation if Iran targets Qatari energy infrastructure again. The Financial Times says Trump is struggling to distance himself from Israel, highlighting contradictory accounts that complicate efforts to contain escalation. Separately, Al Jazeera reports the death toll in Lebanon has passed 1,000 amid continued Israeli bombardment, and missile strikes have landed close to journalists covering attacks in southern Lebanon. There is also movement in Africa's Great Lakes region, with the BBC reporting DR Congo and Rwanda have agreed to ease tensions after U.S. facilitated talks. On the global economy, the immediate transmission channel is energy. Higher oil and gas prices, shipping risk around the Strait of Hormuz, and renewed inflation pressure. The Financial Times reports the White House says it is not considering an oil export ban despite surging prices, amid industry concern that panic measures could backfire. Countries, including European nations and Japan, are discussing appropriate efforts to help reopen or secure Hormuz, according to Al Jazeera, as governments try to stabilize supply expectations. In Australia, the international energy shock is now a domestic policy issue. The Sydney Morning Herald reports the Prime Minister has established a fuel supply task force as the conflict and shipping disruption feed into price and availability concerns. SBS notes petrol prices have surged in recent weeks, though Australia remains cheaper than many countries, and the key question is how long elevated global crude and refined product costs persist. On the Australian economy and politics, attention is turning to reform ambition under uncertainty. The Conversation's Grattan analysis says Treasurer Jim Chalmers is trying to use economic volatility as a springboard for reform, with a political constraint being how bold the government is willing to be. The Conversation also revisits the capital gains tax discount debate, arguing the settings worsen intergenerational inequality, and suggesting reform is back on the table in the broader tax conversation. In federal state settings, the GST fight is sharpening. The SMH reports NSW Treasurer Daniel Mookie says the GST system is broken and wants Western Australia's deal watered down, framing it as a federation-level pressure point likely to intensify ahead of budget negotiations. For the Australian public service and the technological revolution, the immediate development is less about new announcements and more about operating conditions, energy-driven cost pressures, heightened national security demands, and the need to keep essential services resilient as crises compound. Artificial intelligence remains a strategic backdrop rather than a single headline today, with governments and markets increasingly treating AI as core infrastructure in productivity, defense, and information integrity. Finally, locally in Queensland, tropical cyclone Narelle is forecast to begin making landfall in far north Queensland this morning. The ABC is running live coverage, and the Conversation describes Narelle as compact, dangerous, and unusually predictable in its track. If you're in a warning area, the key updates today are timing, storm surge risk, and power and road disruptions.